It has to be so. We don't hear what's going on.
International. We're just going to wait a few minutes as we're expecting quite a few others to join. So if you could just bear with us for a few minutes.
Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're now up to 68 colleagues on the call, so I think we'll just get started. I'm Ewin Cameron. I'm head of the Consumer Indices Trade team at Scottish Development International. I'm going to chair today's webinar and help manage and facilitate the Q&A. So this is really a follow-up webinar to a session we had last Tuesday, which many of you may have participated in. And the purpose of the webinar is really to help provide further guidance and support around the export documentation required, specifically to help you prepare and complete export health certificates regarding consignments into the 3 hubs. As you know, there's been a number of challenges with getting exports moving from the hubs. So today is really just to provide further guidance on the export documentation and to get updates from Food Standards Scotland and other colleagues on progress at the hubs. So in terms of the agenda, we're going to ask Food Standards Scotland to speak first to give us an update on progress at the 3 hubs over the last few days, and trying to identify any particular areas of the export documentation that we can clarify. We're also pleased to have Kevin Shakespeare, who's Director of Stakeholder Engagement at the Institute of Exports. So those of you who were on the webinar last week, Kevin took us through a few slides, so he's going to take a similar approach again today. And we are also joined by colleagues representing the 3 hubs, and also Joanne Ferguson from the Animal and Plant Health Agency. And Joanne's going to provide an update on a helpline service that APHA are looking to introduce. So we'll bring Joanne into the conversation at a later stage. The session is being recorded. Similar to last week, if I can ask you to raise any questions or put any questions into the chat box, and we'll try our best to answer these as we go. We'll ask colleagues at Food Standards Scotland and Kevin to speak prior to us moving into a verbal Q&A. So first of all, just introduce Sandy McDougall, Head of Operational Delivery at Food Standards Scotland, who's going to speak first.
Thanks, Ewan. Yep. Well, it's just over a week since we last met, and I have to say quite a lot has happened in that time, some good, some not so good. We've continued to work very, very closely with the 3 hubs. The main change we've made in the last week is that we've put more resources into 2 of the hubs. In Mesgwen, we've more than doubled the number of certifying officer hours for them, because this is now gives them the ability to issue certificates from 9 AM until 8 PM, whereas previously it was only in the afternoons. And that seems to have made a difference to the flow through Mesgwen. DFDS, we've put in quite considerable extra hours in, so we're now spreading again the day between 9 AM and 9 PM, and it's quite often, like it did last night, going on later than that. So we're in a position at the moment where we've got staff in training, and other temporary staff that we've got, they are fully manning as many hours as we can in those 2 hubs. The third hub, O'Toole's, still has plenty of capacity within the 1 certifying officer that we've got in there. He's easily capable of doing the demand at the moment within 4 or 5 hours a day, and if demand goes up there, then he'll obviously just work a full day. So from our staffing point of view, the new staff that we recruited, had been planned to recruit before Christmas, came on board last week, and they are gradually getting up to speed. We often have to remember that many of them have actually only been doing export health certificates for less than 10 days now. So they're gradually getting to grips with things. So I'm confident at the moment that as many staff as we physically have room for are in the hubs, and it has meant that in the past week since we last met, we've completed the export health certificates for everything that's been presented to us. But it's fair to say this hasn't been without challenges. On the downside, many of the challenges that I asked for support from the industry on to seek resolution to are still occurring as of today, and that I think you'd all agree is quite disappointing. Yesterday, as a good example, in one hub there were 9 loads that had significant administrative problems with the paperwork coming into the hub, which meant that there were significant delays to some loads. Certainly a couple of loads yesterday, which I'll come on to talk about in a bit more detail, actually took 8 hours from the point at which we received the export health certificate to when we were able to sign it, and the other one took 10 hours. Clearly that's not a sustainable way forwards. So I mentioned last week issues around commodity codes, batch numbers, supplier declarations, weights, and box numbers. These are still causing problems. We had to unload a couple of vehicles this week because of confusion around batch numbers, and yesterday a consignment just couldn't go out because there was confusion over commodity codes. So are we making progress? I'm not sure as we are, to be honest. We're still finding a significant number of issues coming through. I think in terms of DFDS, it's fair to say that the export summary control document that DFDS issued last week and asked for your support in completing is helping. But I think they're finding that the information coming through and it is again just exposing some of the weaknesses with the incoming documentation. So one of the things that I know DFDS might want to come and talk about, and they did ask me to emphasize this, the importance of completing that export summary control document is really quite critical in this process. On the positive side, though, when we're seeing loads come in with absolutely perfect documentation, they're flying through the system. So it can be done. You know, I mentioned 9 loads yesterday had problems with. Equally, the balance to that was probably 11, 12 loads didn't in one of the hubs. So it can be administered efficiently. We've seen some really excellent performances on some days. I think there was one day I looked at over the weekend where many of the certificates were issued in an hour, some slightly less than an hour, some just around the hour and a half. So it is possible, but we need to get to a consistent level of performance that makes that the norm and not the exception. Now, with groupage, we know that a couple of the hubs started groupage collections again on Monday. It's not gone as well as we, and at the Royal we being ourselves and the hubs, would have liked to have seen. The hope was that with giving everybody a break, that there would be an opportunity to get the administration slick. But I'm advised that yesterday on 2 groupage loads in a particular hub, 40% of the consignments on 2 loads had major problems with the paperwork coming in. So actually 7 out of 17 consignments caused a holdup of 8 to 10 hours for those loads. And I think it's fair to say, I believe that actually some of those consignments may well in the end of the day had to be taken off because they just couldn't resolve the issues. We finally got the rest of those loads certified, so the majority of the loads left quite late last night. So we are working at getting as much out the door as we can, but it's still a long way to go before I think we can have confidence to say that the administration coming in allows the hubs to turn them around quickly so that our certifying officers have actually quite an easy job. The reality checks that has been a subject of some consternation about, you know, how we were being perhaps overzealous. I know my colleague Lawrence Patea, who's the operations manager, has spent quite some time in the hubs over the last weekend and the early part of this week, and he has reset our expectations with our certifying officers. So the reality checks now, I think we're confident, and feel free to come in, Lawrence. The reality checks are now quite minimal in the overall scheme of things. But if an officer does find a problem, that's where it all goes somewhat wrong, because then that load gets held up. So I think that's probably all I would want to say. Is there anything, Lawrence, that you'd like to come in to add to that? And I think Ian wants to come in and say something about supplier declarations. Ian, maybe you could come in.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation and for all joining. Just to give a little bit of added assurance around Sandy's update, that my team are working absolutely flat out to support the hubs. If I can just reiterate what I mentioned last week, that certification, the signing of the export health certificate, is the very last thing in the process before that lorry leaves. Before it's sealed and goes, certification comes last. a lot of processes have to happen in front of that certification process, and they have to happen correctly with all supporting documentation present. And as Sandy mentioned, it's clear that there is still a challenge in making sure that all of that paperwork is actually present and correct. And the simple fact is that if it is not correct, those errors are being picked up in the main by the hub operators, who are also working flat out. I had a member of staff that had worked from early morning to midnight last night, and not only was she reporting exhaustion as a result of that, but the hub staff as well are working absolutely flat out to try and do what they can to get trade flowing. But that being said, if the paperwork is not correct, it is just creating back pressure in the system, and it means that that a lot of further work, a lot of further checks, a lot of chasing up has to be undertaken in order for that paperwork to be the complete, accurate set to be presented to the certifying officer. And for every error that the hubs are picking up, it just simply delays the presentation of that load to be certified. And things like supporting declarations or supplier declarations. Now, FSS is here as a certifying officer. We're not here to defend the rules that are required by the EU. The EU are simply treating us as a third country. We are external to that club, if you like, and we have to comply with quite burdensome administration, I have to say, but that is life, and I'm afraid that's we're just going to have to get used to that. But getting used to it also, it goes hand in hand with getting better at it. And I think that industry, government, ourselves will all get better at what we're trying to achieve here. And I appreciate and fully understand the pressures and challenges that you're facing. It must be so difficult, and I'm hearing some real horror stories out there. But I did want to assure you that we are doing all that we can to get product flowing as quickly as we can. But it seems to be that there is a consistency in the errors that are contributing to delays here. And that's why I asked at the start of the meeting whether the hubs were in attendance. Now, I got the response saying that the hub personnel have accepted the invite, but I'm not entirely sure that that equals that they're actually here in the meeting. So you and Donna, if maybe we could do a wee bit of a hub roll call after my inject here, it would be helpful to see who's here, because it's fair to say the hubs are as frustrated as we all are. They're trying to do a good job of work. They're working flat out, but there's only so much they can do if the paperwork is wrong. And I think a common theme is fair to say, and I know that Lawrence and Elena are both on the call who have been working in the hubs, have been identifying that the supplier declaration, which the UK Chief Veterinary Officers agreed amongst themselves was required to get round the veterinary attestation for premises that are not in direct line of sight. Normally a vet would only sign for stuff that they can actually see. Groupies requires an attestation further back in the supply chain. So the supplier declaration is an absolute requirement. It's not gold plating it, it's just to make sure that there's a declaration from the supplying business that goes along with the health certificate. So I'll pause there, Ewan. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I think there's going to be a lot of value personally out of the Q&A session as we had last time, and fingers crossed we'll get some good answers and dialogue going today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ian. And as you say, the three hubs confirmed their attendance. So I just wonder if either DFDS, Meswin, or JDOT are present and would like to give an update from their perspective.
Hi, David from DFDS here.
Hi, David.
Hello, everybody. So I can just really kind of just back up what Ian was saying. The amount of paperwork that we need to check and go back to customers with is quite phenomenal. I was doing, for example, a health cert preparing to health cert for dispatch today between 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock last night. And then from 11 o'clock, well, from 9 o'clock until 1 o'clock this morning, I was dealing with it still as regards to supplier declarations. So we are giving our customers feedback. We are moving forward. We are learning a lot from it, and the way that I could probably describe it is that we're in the process at the minute of improving how the information is shared and what information we need to share, and trying to get people as accurate as possible. The customers are certainly assisting us in providing more accurate information when we do request it. But I think the issue is slightly that for everybody, people don't realise how accurate everybody needs to be. That one, like for example, putting a hyphen in between you might have an order with 20, you might have a truck with 20 different orders on it, 5 or 6 different suppliers, and somebody puts their approval number in with a hyphen, that rejects the whole health cert, health cert, for example. So it is a whole learning curve, and it is we are certainly giving feedback on a daily basis, and it is quite a slow process, but certainly we can see improvement already. Yeah. So that's kind of, yeah, but there's no denying that it is, there's a lot going back and forth to make sure information is 100% correct.
Okay, thanks, David. Ian, you've got a question.
It's a question really for David. David, thank you for that update. I met with the FDS director following the last meeting, and there was that it was Steve McCauley, and that was that assurance that that feedback to supplying businesses would be provided. Could you maybe just expand on that? Because there's been further correspondence that has come to me today via Mr. Ewing, where it does seem as though that there are businesses that are supplying into you that are perhaps not getting the specific feedback. And I'm just wondering if you can maybe say a bit more about what feedback you're providing and how much detail you can go into, as in what bits of paperwork are, in your view, seem to be causing the problems.
Yeah, so we're giving customers feedback on a individual basis. So whenever they submit information we're sending out general information emails to them, and that has been going on for months. And there's no doubt about that with the guidance. Obviously, when the more we're getting into this, and the guidance, the information we're receiving, and the guidance it's not changing, but it's getting more and more clarified. And there are general emails going out as regards to that. Then whenever our customers submit information to us, then we give them guide. We'll go back to them if something is incorrect or it's not complete, for example. Before customers can work with us, they do need to be compliant. That's one thing I would like to make clear. So maybe some customers who mightn't have heard back yet, is we're waiting for information from them, for example. So even before we can confirm whether we can transport a customer's goods, there has to be certain information which they can provide to us. But even with that information, when it's provided to us, it's like there are still hurdles that we still need to overcome. So even though a customer is compliant and being able to provide us with commodity codes, for example, and with their ERI numbers and the like, then there is you go further down the line, or perhaps they haven't filled a supplier declaration incorrectly, or they haven't filled a health cert template incorrectly, or something like that, or we've had examples of people giving us a weight on their invoice of 100 kilos, and then the health cert template comes through as 105 kilos. When you're dealing with, for example, there's inaccuracies like that. I know it's not easy for everybody, and it's not a criticism of people, it's just an example of what the challenges we're facing. So feedback certainly has come back to people who work with the FDS, there's no doubt about that. People may be waiting because we're dealing with so many different customers. So you might have, I don't know if what the feedback that was received by Mr. Ewing, but certainly we are working long hours to try to ensure that people are receiving information back to them as quickly and as effectively as possible. We're also, as I say, we're planning to do before the end of this week just another recap email of what we've learned over the past number of weeks. And we're also going to be sending an email out, just a checklist of what the customers need to do, and kind of like little things to watch out for, what we've learned, what the common errors are and stuff like that, and what we've learned to try to help them people who maybe aren't as used to the processes, avoiding those kind of same, not mistakes, but same kind of like issues which can, same kind of errors which can cause delays to trucks getting certified and then departing from here. Yeah, that's basically it.
You're on mute, Ewan.
Sorry. Thanks, David, for the feedback. Do we have any representation from Mesgwen or O2?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Paul Mesgwen speaking. I want to repeat all David said earlier. We have the same problems, and we try to improve with all parts of people who are concerning by it. FFS customers, our people in and our staff, and we have spent 2 horrible weeks, and now things improve day by day, and we have taken the decision last week to put 1 more day for the delivery, and now it's getting better, and some goods are delivered as it was in 2020, but it's still hard with all papers to have all goods information. As David says, sometimes we got invoice with the 100 kilos and it is 105, and that takes a lot of time to everyone, but we can say today that things are not like the first and the second week, and it's really improved this week, and it's going on the right way, but everybody has to, I think, to continue on that way, and for sure we will all find a good way, or maybe not as it was in 2020 and as it was before, because I think everybody now have taken the things that all it happened now will change the business, but I think for sure we can be really close that we have done on the years before. So it takes time. It takes too much time for sure, but it's getting better every day.
Okay, thank you. You didn't introduce yourself at the start there. I'm assuming you're from Mesgwen.
Yeah, Mesgwen. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
You not recognize my French accent, no?
So thank you. So if there's no one from O'Toole's here, I suggest what we'll.
Sorry, yeah, Laura from O'Toole on the call.
Okay, Laura, thank you. Would you like to comment, give an update?
Yeah, I definitely feel that we are benefiting from running the trial period before. We had really good communications with our customers during the trial period, just getting the paperwork right, and just things that they required and what we needed. So I definitely feel like we are feeling the benefits from the trial now, just getting things through and processed. We're managing to get all our certificates submitted to the officer in time for them starting, and we're getting them signed off in a reasonable amount of time. We have the same issues as the other hubs with things like commodity codes and just weights not matching, but just speaking to the customer and getting it sorted just as quickly as we can to get it signed off. But I definitely feel like we're doing really well, and every day it is improving day by day. So that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Okay. Thanks, Laura. Thanks for that update. Okay, Donna's got her hand up. Donna.
Yeah, thanks, Ewan. I know we're not taking questions, but it was really just on David. You know, David, we are getting feedback from companies saying, you know, that they don't know what's wrong with their paperwork still, you know. So I don't know who's tasked with speaking to some of the companies, but I know one company said that they didn't know their goods were removed off the consignment last night until their customer said this morning and things. So there's just odd examples that are coming up. So it was just really, it's probably been flagged that, you know, customers are really needing to know. And I know that you're snowed under with stuff, but you know, I think some of the companies are just wanting to know what they could be doing better to make sure that we can get groupage back up and running as soon as possible.
Thanks, Donna. Okay, I'm conscious of time, and sorry, Ian.
I was just wanting to pick up on what Donna was saying there, because and just to echo the thing about it's in everyone's interest here to get groupage up and running effectively and efficiently. The reason being is that the very reason that groupage is here is that the added burden of certification to the EU places the numbers of individual certificates, if they were to leave and be certified at the premises of origin, in the six-figure territory. And that is a burden that the usual local authority circuit cannot accommodate. There are not sufficient vets around the country that could accommodate that number either. And equally, it's the added cost into the system as well, that if we've had, I think it was maybe in one of these webinars, you know, we had somebody indicating that they had, no, it was in the meat webinar that I did for their export issues, that one of the businesses had actually been quoted £800 for one export certificate. So there is an element of profiteering out there, absolutely, and the absolute intent behind groupage was that a consignment of many, or a full load of many smaller consignments can be certified with one certificate, therefore keeping the cost down. And we have kept the charge element that we are making to the hubs as low as possible. So we're charging on our base rate. We're operating on just a cost recovery basis. We're not operating to profit out of this. But it's really to make sure that there is sufficient certification capacity in the country, that it's in everyone's interest to try and make groupage work. So again, it's just to reiterate, you and Donna, that we are working flat out to make that happen, as are the staff in the hubs. And if we can get over this hump in terms of the missing or inaccurate paperwork, I think it would be of great help. And I think, Donna, your point is really spot on, that, you know, there's a bit of mixed messaging going on here in terms of what is actually being fed back to supplying businesses. And I think that's causing huge frustration just in of itself. And if there could be some additional input into the communication channels to at least ensure that all supplying businesses have a clear understanding of what is it that has gone wrong as part of their consignment. I put in the early part of the chat bar here, you know, the meeting I have every week with DEFRA and industry, you know, there was a consignment of product that got held at French customs for a considerable period of time because the weights did not reconcile and were out by 750 grams. So there is close scrutiny by EU customs officials of the paperwork. I did mention that weeks 1 and weeks 2 were a kind of grace period. That is now since gone, and certainly French and Dutch officials are looking very closely at all of the paperwork, and it makes absolute sense to make sure that when it leaves the hub, we've done all we can to make sure it's spot on. And we have not had, touch wood, but there's not been a single load that we've had rejected once we've you know, seen the sealed load and the certificate signed. It's all gone through as far as we're aware. Thank you.
Okay, so I think at this stage I'm going to bring in Kevin Shakespeare, who is going to take us through a few slides similar to what Kevin did last week, which will hopefully help provide further guidance. And after Kevin's presentation, we can move into a Q&A.
Okay, thank you, Ewan. I'm not going to repeat all the slides I gave last week. I appreciate some of the audience may not have been on last week, so the slides will be available, but I'll quickly go through them. Hopefully you can share my see my screen. Please let me know if you can't.
Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah.
Kevin,
Great,
yeah.
thank you. So last week I went through some slides around the trade journey and in terms of the requirements for export health certificates, catch certificates, and some of the requirements on labelling and packaging as well, and also requirements on moving goods through out in terms of GVMS, the Goods Vehicle Movement Service. And then in terms of the import pre-notification through traces in the case of the European Union. All I'm going to do this week is focus on the customs declaration information requirements. And although customs declarations may or may not be seen as the issue here, it is important to note some of the information that's required for customs declarations because it has huge similarities to a lot of the information required for export health certificates as well. So the documentation requirements are key, and irrespective of whether you're using a customs agent, you're doing it yourself, you're using a freight forwarder or a fast parcel operator. I know there have been a few questions on fast parcel operators, express operators. You will be required to provide specific information. In some cases, it might be that you'll be filling out their own form like a fast parcel operator, but in a lot of cases, it will be the information from the commercial invoice which becomes key. So commercial invoice must have full details of the trade transaction and the trade movement. And I'm going to show you an example of a customs declaration or the templates required shortly. So clearly commodity codes has been talked about an awful lot today, is a key aspect, and that's required for the customs declaration as well. The Incoterms chosen, so the international commercial terms, the terms of trade, the origin, the gross and net weight, also referred to as mass. And in some cases, customs agents or freight forwarders may require the packing list, and they should have the actual transport document. So, for example, fast parcel operator, the airway bill. And although clearly there are very key issues now, what we would suggest to everyone is that you keep evidence of all this documentation, because on customs audit, even in 2-3 years' time, we might forget what happened now, and customs authorities will require this information. So if we I've just got 2 slides, and these are just example information fields. They are the majority of fields in a customs declaration. So again, we talked last week around the difference of the terminology, the consignor, the exporter, the consignee, the overseas buyer. And we can see here there's lots of information like the packages, the country of first destination, the declarant if someone's making the declaration on your behalf, the country of origin, dispatch, destination, the mode of transport. So we can see there's a fair bit of information required for customs purposes. And clearly there's both an export declaration in Great Britain and an import declaration in the European Union. And as I've talked about previously, who makes that declaration depends on the Incoterms that are agreed. And even if a fast parcel operator is making that on your behalf, you are ultimately responsible for that declaration. And if it's DDP, delivered duty paid, you're responsible for the declaration in the European Union as well. And then you have part 2. So we see here like packages and description of goods. So description of goods must be clear. So it must be entirely clear as to what those description of goods are. Clearly the commodity code there. And any additional information documents required, which is clearly in sector with the likes of export health certificates, catch certificates becomes very important. So I just wanted to sort of go over that in terms of showing the requirements of the customs declaration. And obviously these slides are available to recognise that everything is interlinked. The information, we keep talking about paperwork, data, information, is all interlinked. So businesses and I appreciate it's extremely difficult, can create templates and have this information to hand if there's regular data. That would really help as well. And thank you for listening to me.
Thanks, Kevin. So, Sandy, you've got a question.
Yes, I'm just wondering whether we should bring Joanne in before we get into the Q&A, Ewan.
Yes, yeah, we can bring Joanne in. So, with Joanne, are you on the call?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Hello.
Great, Joanne. Over to you. You want to give an update on a helpline service? Yep.
Yep. Okay, so we've set up a facility. It's not going to be a helpline, but it's a facility that allows you to ask for advice to help to how to ensure the successful completion of information and attestations to enable export health certificates. So we'll be able to advise on things like the data you should supply, the formatting of documents, what you need to get in place to enable the EHCs to be signed in the first place. This is a service for supplying advice, and we are not able to certify export health certificates on your behalf. So you still need to go to your certification business, FSS, or local authority for that. So the way it's going to work is that if you would like to discuss anything around the completion of EHCs, please email the inbox, which is certificationcapacity@apha.gov.uk. Hopefully that can be sent round in some way. And if you send your contact number, and so this could be either yourselves or your nominated certifying officer. If you list the questions that you have, that would be really helpful, but if it's not essential. Then we'll forward your requests onto our vets. So we've got some experienced vets in export health certificates, and they'll give you a call back and discuss what queries you've got. So although they are experienced in export health certificates, however, as with everybody else, it's a new area to them as well. But so if there's any questions they're unable to answer, they're going to be able to escalate it within DEFRA and APHA and get you the answer as soon as possible. And our vets will be contactable between, well, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So if there's any questions or queries about how that's going to work, then let me know. But yes, if you can just email any questions you've got to certification capacity, which is all one word, @apha.gov.uk.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. That could potentially be very helpful. Has everyone got any questions that they would like to put to Joanne on her explanation there?
Nope. Marvelous.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm not seeing any questions. Okay. So we can move into a Q&A. Obviously, Kevin Shakespeare's got a lot of expertise here. If there's any questions that Kevin could help with, please raise your hand. So, David.
Hi, it's David Robertson, Environmental Health at Shetland Islands Council. I just thought I'd mention, well, you mentioned, Ian, that earlier that the lack of supplier declaration has been a common issue at the hubs. There is a difference, however, relating to supplier declarations for product coming to the hubs from approved fish markets, as it is this establishment that has the supporting attestation from the local authority. The hub customer who is supplying will simply be a buyer, then they can't make a declaration as it relates to the fish market. So I just wanted to check that when buyers present product at the hub for an EHC, that this link is being made.
Okay, who wants to answer, Sandy?
Yeah, we'll bring Lawrence in there, but I think David, on the I know this question that came in earlier on in the week, I think, to Lawrence. So we've actually produced a very short Q&A at the moment. So for any technical queries, I'm capturing them from the sidebar, and we'll answer them separately. But I think the one that you're specifically referring to, I think may well be covered by question and answer 6 on the document that Donna sent out earlier on today. If it doesn't, then drop us another line. I think is that right, Lawrence? Are you happy with that?
Sorry, Sandy, I had issues connecting and I dropped off everything.
Okay.
But with the supplier declaration, will still be required even from the markets. It's just something that we will need to look into this to see if the wording has been needed to be amended, because what some local authorities have been doing some work and amending the wording to make sure that the products covered are just the products handled on the market, not any other products. But we'll probably make it clearer in the Q&A answer.
Okay, David, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just thought I'd come back very quickly. Myself and a few other colleagues in local authority up here, have Highland as well, have brought in, have been working on what Lawrence has mentioned, and we've produced a document locally which we hope will suffice. So myself and Lawrence had a bit of an email conversation earlier in the week about it. So yeah, I can certainly forward that on, but I'm sure it would be fine. But yeah, it's just to make the point that that connection is made as it relates to buyers relying on supplier declarations from the fish markets.
Yeah, and the fish market will attest that the handling of the product is still being done according to the regulations. So that's what it needs to be done. But as I said, we'll take this away and answer. But also just to highlight that DEFRA and APHA need to be happy with what we're proposing as well.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence. Donna, you want to come back in?
Yes, I've had a few messages coming in, so I've been asked to ask the questions really of just around what is the major problems that the hubs are facing? Is full loads getting through? Is it just groupage, or is it everything? Is it just all paperwork errors? Is it all coming from the companies that have paperwork errors, and is that getting fully fed back to the companies? And if the companies aren't being able to do their paperwork, are they just getting removed from groupage at the moment, or is what just being done just to try and get them back on board? So that's, I don't know if anybody from any of the hubs wanted to come in with that, but that's what I'm being asked.
Okay, thanks, Donna. So David or any colleagues from the hubs, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, it really does depend, to be totally honest, on what the issue is. If it's an issue of where we can change a weight on a health cert template, of course we'll try to help our customers. We have had an issue with incorrect commodity codes, and and this is not an issue for the customers themselves, because they in good faith have tried to find the commodity code on the gov.uk website. And there are some commodity codes, and this has happened to a few people, for example, where the commodity code for that product has been classified with a product which needs a special license. And then when you go to try to create the export declaration for that commodity code, for example, a PNR code comes up, or PNR error comes up, which means that we cannot proceed any further. So in that case, there's nothing we can do. If we cannot create the export declaration, the goods can't go. It's as simple as that. But of course, if there is an issue where it's a simple weight issue, that's what I was sitting doing yesterday, sitting doing this morning. I'm going back to the customers as quickly as possible and trying to give them the feedback, resubmit that with the correct batch number, for example on the supplier declaration, or resubmit that invoice so that or that health cert template so it corresponds to your invoice. So of course, when we can help, we will try to help, but there are some situations completely that we really can't, goods would have to be held back here because the documentation can't be raised for them to move. So it all really depends on the scenario or how serious the issue is, whether the goods would be removed from the trailer or not, for example.
Okay, thanks, David. And we've got a number of questions here. So Donald, I think you're next. Donald McLean.
Hello, it's actually Katrina Sinclair here.
Hi,
Katrina. Yeah, we just had that problem that David has just spoken about. The product was skate wings. On the catch certificate, the commodity code showed up for that, and we put the same code on our commercial invoice. And apparently, when the health certificate was done at the hub, that commodity code did not show up on the system, on the health certificate system. And as a result, none of the product got dispatched. So that's a big issue for us. And what can be done about it? Is there
okay. Thanks. Sandy wants to come in and respond, I think.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, we were made aware of this. Certainly colleagues in DFDS raised this one with me this afternoon, and within the last 15 minutes I've now got the way forwards on this, some very good advice from Scottish Government colleagues. So I'll be sending that down to DFDS as soon as this call's finished, and we seem to have a way forwards on this one. And more importantly, now we've got the name of the person within in Scottish Government who can actually deal with matters and questions related to commodity codes, which is really quite important, because this isn't the first one that's cropped up in the past fortnight. So the skate wings, I think we've got a solution to this afternoon.
Okay, thanks, Sandy. I'm not seeing any other hands up at the moment. Sorry.
It's Donald here from Atlantic. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah. No, what happens to that consignment that we put in last Sunday that we thought would go out on Monday, but didn't? It was supposed to go out last night, and then this morning I was led to believe from the customer the stuff in Bridge, France. That stuff's still in the hub in Glasgow, and it's not going tonight either, because no one could give us the answer of what was wrong with what we could do. So as far as I can see, my whole consignment will have to be destroyed, which is quite a bit of money. And where do we go from here? Can anyone give me an answer there?
Which hub were you supplying?
DFDS, David Cranston. David knows about it, but there's nothing David could do about it, because
this was the one with I was just describing. Sorry, Donald, with regard to it wouldn't actually allow you to raise an export declaration for that commodity code.
Kevin, would you have any guidance on that one?
Sorry, is this skate wings as well?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Again, I'm obviously not aware of these of the specific circumstances. I think you mentioned P&R codes, prohibition and restriction codes, and I think what would be good is to actually obviously within the chief system and the EU, there's requirements for some goods, P&R codes and licensing. If we can link the actual commodity codes with the actual P&R licensing requirements, I think that would be good. And as well as obviously clarity on commodity codes to use, which I'm pretty sure has been given, but really to make it clear. I think another thing we possibly need to take away with HMRC is it is possible to obtain what was called binding tariff information, BTIs, which was an advanced commodity code, albeit that was under the EU system, not the UK. So I think there's a possible action there to check with HMRC to see if they have previous BTIs on some of these products.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. David Robertson, is that you've still got your hand up? Is that a previous question, or do you want to come in with a additional question?
Sorry, schoolboy error. Left my hand up.
And Laura Edgar.
Hi, Laura from O'Toole. I just wanted to say, in terms of the issues that the other hubs are having with commodity codes, I spent some time with the customers just running through the trade tariff website and making sure they understood how to read it and what codes they needed. Any issues that we've had codes coming back with, we've sent them, asked them to ask HMRC how they're getting on, what code they should be using, and we've kind of limited a majority of the commodity code issues. like we don't seem to be having as many issues as the other hubs with the commodity codes just by giving out this trade tariff website. We've ran, our full loads are going really well getting in our groupage service from the start of the week. We've had some really good success off the back of your groupage service. If there's anything that we can help with here at O'Toole, or anything that Laurencio maybe wants to contact if we're having issues, I could maybe help with anything, please just let me know.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Elena?
Yes, thanks, Ewan. Just on the back of Donna's original question, I was going to jump in. It's Elena from FSS. From our perspective, because obviously the hubs are identifying several issues. However, we are finding a few issues during our checks on the product as well. And I think it's worth mentioning that the hub will be working on the paperwork mostly. They will not do maybe a detailed inspection of the product. So I think it is with the suppliers to ensure, and you've heard a lot in the last 2-3 weeks about batch numbers, but there are inconsistencies and what is on the paper at times, and I'm not saying it's happening very often, but it is still happening, that it does not match precisely what's on the label. So then we try to amend that to match, or something else. Approval codes don't match precisely. Some of them still have UK in front of them. We cannot send those out, so we need to amend the schedule, which means if the number of boxes or the weights or anything gets amended on the schedule, that impacts on the actual certificate itself as well. And those changes have to be made manually by the certification officer, which means the whole day gets a bit behind with everything. So these delays may seem, oh, it's only 2 boxes and it's only it's not 1801/21, it's 1801/2021, and it's a small issue, but those trigger delays in the whole process. So I think it's worth suppliers just double and triple checking that everything matches from their side and matches the paperwork as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Elena. Got a question from Michael.
Yeah, Michael from O'Toole here. Just during this week and one of the loads we had last week, had a few issues with the requirements on the EHCs by the CVEP. We've sort of noticed that different CVEPs, like some in France, some in Spain, Italy, Belgium, they have different requirements, and they prefer the health certificate to be filled out differently. Have you guys come across this at all, and have you any sort of guidance on that?
Sandy?
Yes, we are picking up a reasonable number of these sort of inconsistencies between the different countries. And we're meeting every afternoon with colleagues from DEFRA and other certifying organisations across the UK, just to coordinate all of these various quirks that seem to be cropping up every day. And the DEFRA are engaging with the Commission, and we're engaging earlier on this week, and the UK CVO has, we understand, written to the Commission, or is in the process of writing to the Commission about many of these issues that are cropping up. At this moment in time, the guidance from APHA is that we should be sticking to the notes for guidance that accompany every export health certificate. So that's the instructions to our certifying officers. Many of the things that have been found or reported, there have been immediate discussions with certainly the Dutch and the French on a couple of things, and they've agreed, if you like, a moratorium that for the time being loads will not be rejected. So for instance, the French want blue ink on the stamps for the export health certificate. We've been using red, as has most organisations in the UK. They've agreed that they won't be rejecting certificates and loads if any come through with red ink, but quite clearly at some point in time, this is going to need to be factored into revised notes for guidance for certifying officers. So we are capturing a lot of these and discussing them every evening with DEFRA.
Can I just pick up as well on that, Sandy, because we've had that previously. It come up at the DEFRA meeting today, and as Sandy said, the Commission are being made aware of that, and efforts are currently underway to ensure that guidance is available for officials in the EU insofar as their interpretation of requirements is concerned. And that ink issue is a good case in point, Sandy, you know, where the French actually expressed a preference. So we've accommodated that, and we get rid of all of our ink stuff. Well, we provided an alternative colour. But we're reminding the officials that, okay, we're doing this because your officials at the point of entry are looking at it at this level. But the actual requirement is that that so long as the ink is a different colour from the typeface on the printed certificate, then that is all that is required. So you can see the you know, if we're getting some of the basic information wrong, you can see how perhaps pernickety, for want of a better word, you know, some officials are being, that, you know, we just don't want to give them any chance to reject stuff where possible. And if you've got commodity codes that are incorrect, or there is any discrepancy in the certificate itself, then they'll reject it completely. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, Ewan, I think there was certainly earlier on this week intelligence coming back from Holland that they were insisting on the front of the export health certificate that officers were writing the words net and gross in Dutch, which clearly isn't a requirement. But DEFRA then pushed back on that, and very quickly there was a sort of agreement that this really wasn't something that should be happening. So as they're cropping up, I do think DEFRA are doing their utmost to broker sensible resolutions to many of these issues that are coming through.
Okay, thanks, Andy. We're kind of almost over time. I've got a question for David Cranston. David, is there anything that SDI or anyone else could be doing to help DFDS in terms of your communication of information back to your customers?
Let me have a think about that, okay? I'm sure there is some way that people can help, but I'll have a think about that and then get back, okay? But there is, yeah, it's just about obviously as I have said, I think it's very important for us just to what we have planned to do with customers is to give an update with the common errors that we've encountered over the last couple of weeks, and just to highlight them to people so we can try to avoid them happening again. And it's just a question of making sure that all the correct documentation is uploaded to our system. And once we do give that feedback to the customers in a one-stop email with a checklist as well, that we would like to hope that that would answer a lot of the questions they may have.
Okay, thanks, David. Okay, I'm just checking if there's any more. So Georgina Wright.
Yeah, thanks, Ewan. Georgina Wright from Moby, Scotland. We understand that AFA are beginning to work with Food Standards Scotland in terms of, reviewing the EHC process and the guidelines that were given. Would there be any benefit from actual industry or supplier personnel being involved in that, just based on, you could say, the intricacies of supplying seafood? I mean, just from a personal experience, our experience with DEFRA and AFA some years ago, they seemed to have a very good understanding of the meat industry, but obviously the shelf life of fish, and of course in particular shelf life, is quite different. And also understanding the HACCP and the BRC process, but that support the Scottish seafood industry. I really think the relevance of that needs to be taken into account. So I'm sure a number of people on this call would offer their businesses to support any process of refining this.
Okay, thanks, Georgina.
Georgina,
Ian,
I'll pick up on that. I'm not entirely sure what review you're speaking of, Georgina. I mean, APHA colleagues come up to the hubs yesterday and are there today to try and get a better understanding of what the issues are. Given that APHA are actually the lead authority for all the certification requirements, and certainly we are just simply following what the DEFRA APHA guidance requires of us. So in terms of that review of the certification process, you know more than I do then. I'm not aware of any review being undertaken.
Well, perhaps I misunderstood, but I was on the salmon industry call this morning with Sandy, and it was understanding that AFA staff were reviewing it, and I really do respect that Food Standards Scotland is following the guidelines that have been issued by AFA, sitting underneath DEFRA. But it's really for AFA to have a better understanding of the Scottish seafood industry and its certification and all the heavy accreditations that we all have, that would then perhaps influence guidelines, which may in turn lead to this guidelines for the certifying officers and the EHSOs to, as you referred to, that ultimate very precious final document.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the very specifically, the review that Sandy was referring to, I think, and you can speak for yourself, Sandy, was the support, the supplier declaration that we've agreed today, that we're looking into that process very clearly to see what can be refined there. But do you want to add into what you said this morning?
Yes, I think the review that I'm talking about is that we've had a couple of people from APHA looking at both the impact of the procedures on the hub and the impact of the guidance on our certifying officers. So we'll actually get output of that piece of work late tomorrow afternoon. I'm meeting them late on in the afternoon to get their feedback. But we have taken the opportunity as part of that to highlight where there are some very onerous processes as part of the certification process. The supplier declaration, we've absolutely represented that there are concerns across the industry about the burden that's placing, and also how it is holding up loads regularly where supplier declarations aren't being received. We've also highlighted things like on the actual system itself, where it could be a lot more efficient to help our officers save time. As I think we've sort of discussed in many forums, that really in this day and age, should we have people having to manually cross out long paragraphs of text that's not relevant? So these are the sort of things, it's that sort of level that we've been providing feedback to AFA. I think they wanted to see it with their own eyes rather than just take, if you like, my sort of statements of because many of these things might sound low level, but 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, when you're doing 22 to 40 certificates a day, all mounts up.
But can I just chip in though, Sandy?
Yep.
I mean, Georgina is absolutely spot on though, in completing that whole journey, if you like, we are, as rightly mentioned, we're at one part of that journey, but there's the whole industry bit and the kind of assurance that can be assumed further upstream that I think Georgina's offer of working with AFA and the industry working with AFA, I think, is well made. So it's helpful to have APHA on the call, and I'm just wondering if that can be directed back to the officials that are working with us at the moment.
I'll certainly do that when I meet with them tomorrow afternoon, Ian. definitely make that point.
Yep. The other thing that's come up in the sidebar, Ewan, that I think, and it's something that I've discussed with my own team as well, and perhaps APHA could help with this one as well, is that can they perhaps provide some examples, templates of what good looks like? And I've had this very discussion with my team. So Fiona McInnes has asked that question. We have as well, and I think that it's something that'd be helpful. So perhaps the hubs working with APHA colleagues, I don't know if that's something that we could seek to establish and get out there. Anonymised, of course. I think we need to obviously respect data protection issues in that. What do you think, Sandy?
Yes, I think it is a matter for the hubs to be sort of saying, right, this is what a good export summary control document looks like. This is what a good supplier declaration looks like, so that could be provided. So then everybody's under absolutely no doubt. The only problem with it is that good means that it's accurate information, which you might not necessarily see from a template.
That's true.
Joanne, do you want to comment on that at all? Or are you able to take that away?
Yeah, I've got a meeting tomorrow at 9 with all the DEFRA people and APHA people, so I'll raise that we could perhaps try and put together a template of what good looks like.
Yeah. Oh, okay, thanks. So we're 10 minutes over time, but we've got there's one more question. Please go ahead. Not sure who it is. There's one hand up. Oh no, it's.
Hello. Yeah, I had my hand up and I feel a bit of a fraud coming in when I see all the big problems that you guys are having. But I was asking the question about mail order smoked salmon going into the EU through FedEx or similar kind of couriers. And we've got over 300 customers that we've built up over many years in the EU. And the question is, does every one of them need to become an importer? This is just ordinary men and women in the street getting 2 or 3 sides of smoked salmon, mail order, and we're being held up because we haven't got the guys at the other end. They haven't got EORI numbers. Is that something that's going to be made different, or do every one of them need to become an importer?
So, okay, so Kevin's got his hand up. Kevin, are you able to answer this?
Yeah, and happy for other colleagues and individuals to make a comment as well. With regard to the responsibility, if you like, as the importer of record or the importer, that will depend, and sorry to maybe use jargon if you're not familiar, Incoterms, the international commercial terms used. So in a lot of international trade transactions, it's unusual for the consumer to be the importer. Simply as you've quite correctly said, to actually get an EORI number is very difficult for the importer. So in a lot of cases, what tends to happen is the exporter is responsible, if you like, as the importer of record, if we use that term, to make the declaration. But that means you're effectively selling on DDP, delivered duty paid terms. Now, a lot of the fast parcel operators operating models, and I obviously won't comment on the different ones, is different. Probably the majority of fast parcel operators, express operators, is a door-to-door service based on DDP, because what they don't want is the consumer rejecting the goods, either when they get it because there's any charges payable, but also because the consumer can't get the EORI number. So the majority of fast parcel operators, and obviously not going to name names here, will work on that basis. 1 or 2 don't, and again, I'm probably not fair that I mention who those are on this call. So that would be, I guess, a partial solution, but that makes you the importer of record, which means more work for you, and you are liable to the overseas customs, so France, Netherlands, or whichever country. But so that's one way, if you like, in making it easier for the consumer, but it does increase costs for you. I guess there are other things around possibly any establishment in the European Union, but that's quite difficult if it's low value. But unfortunately for the amounts, they will require customs declarations because, again, unfortunately, the UK is a third country, having left the European Union and having left the customs union in this case.
Well, thank you. I know that the goalposts have been changing ever since the new year has come in, and some parcels have got through without problem, and then this week they're beginning to hold them all up. And if we haven't got the right paperwork, we're being asked to pay €300 or €400 to get these parcels, which are only worth 100 quid, through to our customer. And it just seems extortionate if we haven't got everything in place. And I wonder what body, I don't want to take up any more time, but what body should I be speaking to that can answer these questions on that lower level of volume consignments going out? Who should I be speaking to?
So we can help you with that and SDI. So we'll follow up with you on that and try and provide you with more guidance.
Okay.
I think it's also fair to say the point I made earlier on and last week about that whole period of grace side of things. So you got some packages through, without any problem the first week and second week, and now there's a problem. And I really genuinely think that's now down to them tightening up and that period of grace being over, I'm afraid.
Yeah, well, we're finding that to our cost now.
Yeah.
4 or 5 parcels held up for over a week. They're not shifting, they're not telling us what they need, and it's just a disaster. It's almost as if, like a lot of companies, they're going to have to give up at the moment in any rate. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we don't have any more questions. We probably haven't addressed a number of things that are in the sidebar, but as we did last week, we'll follow up on these and try and circulate an answer in a few days' time. So I'd just like to thank everyone for your participation. We'll go away and reflect on the information that's been shared, and we can have a think about what we want to do in terms of a kind of follow-up session or further support. So thanks to everyone who's spoken and asked questions. We'll be back in touch through Donna at Seafood Scotland in terms of what we can do further to support. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.